Hi, my name is Doug Tackett, and I would like to give you a brief demonstration of ProWorks. I have on the screen here the main window from ProWorks. This main window is divided into three areas. The first area here is the instructions. In this case, I have text instructions. The second area is my support files. In this case, I'm showing you a bill of materials. We'll change all of these later. In the third area over on the left, I have what I call our instruction tree. And here I have our various steps of our instructions, and we'll check these off as we go through them. For example, if I'm up here on my main area, and these are the main two buttons that the operator is going to be pressing within a procedure, and I'm going to pass this, alright, this step will now be checked off as complete in green with a little check mark. In the lower left corner, I'm keeping track of my times for this process and for each individual step. And I have some special icons over here. These little warning signs are saying these steps just changed because an engineer, namely myself, I went in there and changed something on that step, and just trying to flag the user saying this has changed, so don't go through it too fast. Now, if we get back here to our instruction area, first thing you notice is I have everything in text, normal formatted using Windows, generic text and formatting commands. I'm showing in English. However, I can also show this in German, Spanish, Chinese, or whatever language you want to set the system for. Typically, you might have 3 or 4 languages, but there can be fewer or more, depending upon your needs. In the lower right-hand corner here, I have some more of these support files showing you. The primary support file is going to be a picture, and I can go ahead and click on the picture and zoom up on it so I can see it in a very large scale, or I can look at it in medium view or at thumbnails, whatever suits my needs. Pictures are kind of the backbone of a lot of instructions because a lot of people, they don't care to read all the minute details in the text, and the picture pretty much shows a lot of words can be conveyed in one picture. But we can also go ahead and convey the information by embedding video clips in the instructions. And this is good if there's an overall process, or in this one here, kind of a critical one where you want somebody to see what's going to be happening before they try to do it. And that information might be hard to describe in pictures, or might take a whole lot of text. I can also attach things like drawings here. So I can pop up a drawing that's referenced into that step, and they can actually see what's going on in the drawing. What I a lot of times like to do is like to actually embed things like a DWG. In this case, I've got a drawing, in 3D, and I can go ahead and look at it, play with it if I need to, see exactly what that part's supposed to look like, or the assembly when it's complete. Basically, anything that you can see on your computer, you can go ahead and attach into ProWorks, and it's just a click away. In this case, I grabbed an old Word file that has a process, and maybe I didn't want to take the time to go ahead and put that process in ProWorks line by line, but I still want it attached, and it's kind of handy to have. Another option you can have is I can actually do the reverse and take the results, let's say from a calibration test, and attach them into the process so they're carried along and can be maybe used later when I'm shipping the machine. That calibration that I did way upstream is instantly available for me, and I can go ahead and print that out and ship that with the machine. So I'll go ahead and I'll pass this step and get into more of what I would call an actual assembly step. And one of the things I talked about before was that you can take this text and you can actually do it as a drawing. Sometimes you want to have a little more control over what you're doing by putting some arrows and this type of stuff, and so you can actually go ahead and take a few minutes and draw up the instruction if that suits your needs better, rather than a straight text. Down here on the bottom right, I don't have any other pictures for this because my pictures are actually up here, so we'll go ahead and show you the bill of materials, which is pulled from the ERP system. It's telling you the different parts that you need for this step. Alternately, you can display a bill of tools telling you what tools you need for that step, so they're just available. This information you probably have available someplace in your system already, but when somebody needs to reference it, they have to go dig through a pile of instructions to find it. Within ProWorks, it's right there, instantly available. Now, before the 2 steps, I went ahead and passed them because everything was going great. But in reality, when you're manufacturing, you have problems. And one of the values of ProWorks is we actually learn from the problems. So if I go ahead and click and fail that step, a couple of things are happening. First thing, I'm all of a sudden tracking now the time that I'm spending fixing the problem versus the time that I would normally spend building the part. Because as an engineer, I want to know how much time we're using to address, bad parts and such. Now I have a problem, and what's happened here is I have recurring errors that have happened on this step before. Okay, so previous times when I've run this job, 46 times this thing had some flash on the edge of this valve seat. And then there was a scattering of other problems. And so what ProWorks does is it shows you the most common problems first, tells you, when they last occurred, any special notes and such. If I want to, I could actually click on this icon right down here and ask for help from a manager immediately, but I probably don't need to do that quite yet. If I go ahead and say that, okay, this was my symptom that I found, and I say yes it is, and I press yes, a couple of things happen. First thing, it keeps track that it happened another time. Second, it now goes and looks for those symptoms and says, okay, how did you fix that before? Okay, so 9 times before here, people fixed it just by trimming it off with a razor knife. A really simple, straightforward operation. So I can take this and I can say, oh, hey, yes, this is how I fixed it. Okay, and that's great. And what happens is, it says that's great, you fixed it. I've killed 2 minutes trying to fix it, so we know that for the future use. And I go on to my next step. Now that information, if I need to go back to it the next time I run it, it's right there for the next operator. It doesn't matter if he's in the same plant, different shift, different country, it's instantly available to him. Another thing is I may find the problem, understand that it's a problem, but I might find a new and unique way to fix it. So I'll just say, hey, let's type in a new and unique way to fix it, and I can type in my new and unique way. Okay, I'm not very inventive, I'm sorry. We do have a system that you can put in here where we can classify, what kind of error was this? Was this a materials issue? Was it a missing material issue or a broken issue? Was it a broken mismatched parts? You can set these up flexibly, but it's really good to be able to categorize the issue for the engineers, so then when they start seeing it happen multiple times, they know what to look for. Again, it keeps track of my time, and we go on. Here's a different example of how I might set up a step. Is I've got a step here, and I've got 3 or 4 sub-steps within that step that of options I want the person to perform. And that's great. They can read them. An operator that's done this a few times, he can just go boom, boom, boom through all 3 steps, and I'm not making him say pass at each one. But in this case, I've got one critical operation that I want to make sure that he's actually really performed it. I don't want him to absentmindedly just go ahead and say, yes, I passed it. So what I've done is I've said, oh, ask the operator to make sure that it's really done. So if he tries to just pass it, it's going to still remind him, no, you need to actually say, did you check that retaining ring? I don't want him to blow past it. Once he says yes, then it will go ahead and pass it and let me go on to the next one. Now within these steps, I've set these up, this particular sequence up where I want it done in order. In some of the steps I can show you I can actually run out of order. But in this case I said, no, I want this one done in order. I've got a reason for it as an engineer, and so I force them into doing it in order. Alright, now here's a different format of steps that I've created. This one here I've got 4 instructions, 4 pictures, and I can go through the pictures in order and they match my instructions. Again, if I want it bigger, I can look at them bigger. It just goes ahead and has me go through it. Now, one thing you notice here is this instruction here, it was saying final assembly for the -25 part. I have one procedure here and I make 5 different parts from it. They just differ in their dash number at the very end. As a manager, I set that up when I say, okay, start this job, and it's a -25 part. It takes out everything that's specific to the -10 or the -15 or the -20 part, and gives me just that subset that I need to actually run through. So I can go ahead and just do these steps. And again, I've got my bill of materials, bill of tools there. Now it gets a little more interesting when I go in and I want some process control on something. In this case, I'm down to what my final acceptance test is here, and I've got a diagram of the test setup that we use to check this valve. And I'm asking the operator to just go ahead and monitor a particular, are there any leaks in this valve? And I want to find out from him, are there any bubbles? Are there some bubbles but they're acceptable? Or hey, I've got a full-blown leak and I need to go ahead and rework this part. And again, I would run through my rework procedure like I did in the previous ones when I failed, where it's going to ask me for the symptoms, see if we can match the symptoms and previous workarounds on it. Alright, what I'd like to do here is show you an electronics assembly. It's just a little different, just show you a couple different things that we can do. In this case, we're building a machine. It needs to be wired right with three-phase wiring. And so I'm asking the operator to check my color codes, which is pretty straightforward. Does it match, the pictures that I have here before I start it up and blow some very expensive electronics if I've miswired stuff. Alright. But then what I've done is I've gone on one step further, and now I'm starting to ask them to make some measurements with a multimeter. Okay, and again, this is a very expensive machine. It's worth it to take a few extra minutes, and I can go ahead and ask them to make a measurement, and then maybe they'll put in and say it's got 2 ohms of resistance. Software immediately knows that no, 2 ohms is out of range. That's not going to work. Alright, so now it's going to go ahead and suggest, okay, well, what type of symptom? Is a high circuit, is an open circuit? If it's too high and I say yes, it's going to know from previous ones that, okay, well, maybe it's just some dirty contacts or something like that. So I can go ahead and do this type of stuff. And then once I actually have said I fixed it, it's still going to make me go back and measure it until I give it a value that I've set within our acceptable criteria, which was 0.2 ohms. And again, keeping track of your time. So you can go through this whole process to make sure that the machine is set up. If you actually have the time to, and you have like a RS-232 interface, you can actually go ahead and make the measurements yourself. We have some people use some multimeters that are hooked up to a 488 or 232, and they can just go ahead and read the meters directly rather than making the user type them in. But it just depends upon what level of automation that you want to implement. A couple other things to show you before we jump out here. You do have the ability to waive a step. Alright, so if you have sufficient authority, and I have obviously checked myself in as a manager, I can go ahead and waive a particular step, and I just have to tell it why I waived it. And if I'm not a manager, it's going to ask a manager to sign off, or a power user to sign off on that step, that you can go ahead and waive it. And that way we know that, okay, it really wasn't done, but somebody in authority said yes, you can skip it. As a user, I may go ahead and put some comments in here. I may find something that I worked around and I made it work, but it's not right. And so I want comments in the database that's going to go back to the engineers that say, hey, I observed this and it's not quite right. You need to look at it. So you can go ahead and store all your comments there, and it's in the database, and you can get to the engineers. Of course, before I showed you on the PowerPoint presentation where we can go and look into the different processes and see which ones are ahead or behind. Bring that where you can actually see it. So you can look at these types of reports. We can look at our actual punch list for this particular job. In this one, I've got each step that I've taken, and I'm recording, who did it, what kind of problems we had on it. In this case, I've done this one several times, and I've got a whole series of problems with Flash, so it may need to go out and get reviewed, and I've categorized it. So all that information is nice and handy for me. I talked about the multiple parts, and again, I've got different dash numbers, so I can go ahead and select different ones. So if I say this is now a dash 10, I'm no longer looking at the dash 25 parts, I'm seeing the dash 10 parts. So again, this makes it a little easier to have fewer procedures if I can have them and make them work for multiple different parts. And that pretty much shows me how ProWorks is working. We can also do reports. We can go through crystal reports and do crystal reports. That gets a little bit involved to show you on a quick demo. You can also take our different outputs and drop them into a Excel spreadsheet. Takes just a few seconds. Bring up Excel here, and so now I've got my report, and I've got information on, how much time I spent repair, how much I spent on each step, how much time was estimated, all sorts of information that you can go ahead and mine there. I think that's probably a good place to stop for today. Just briefly show you if we were creating a new template. Okay. Basically, if we're creating templates, you're getting an interface that looks very similar to the jobs interface, but it just allows you to go ahead and type in the text as you see fit. Drag and drop your support files down into this lower right area, add and insert. There's nothing more complicated than that. You just have a few other tabs exposed for you, so you can, let's say, start an external application. Or edit the languages individually. You might have a better translation for German than I have, and you can go ahead and change it in German or whatever you need. I think this is probably a good place to stop on this demonstration before I run out of time. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me, doug.tackett@ectinfo.com. My phone number is 806-367-9950. Thank you for your time.